What's up, fam? Welcome to the family meeting. Now, I know that somebody is like, the family meeting is always on Thursdays. What happened? Sometimes we have to adjust. So we ask for your grace and patience. We had to adjust this week. It's a short week, and it was an even shorter week for me. And so getting it in on a Wednesday is what worked. Today, I actually have a guest. I mean, aside from Kevin, but Kevin ain't really no guest. We don't normally do, guests on the family meeting. Normally it's just me and Krista rambling. But because of all the conversations that have been happening about Muslims are in our nation, and the difference in culture between Islam and the West and things like that, I actually wanted to have on Laura Powell. She's a friend of our ministry, and she really has studied very well, like the subject of Islam. And so I want to ask her questions about Islam and its compatibility with Christianity. I'm hoping that this is just more of a conversation. It doesn't feel like this full on interview. But if you see me looking at my screen, it's because I do have questions that I want to make sure I get to and I answer with her, because I am hoping to show the reality that Islam does not match our American values and freedom, and it is out of line with Christianity. Now, I am not trying to say that America and Christianity are the same. I don't see, America as this great Christian nation, but I do believe that our founding principles within our nation were taken much from the tenets of scripture, and because of that, these are things that we should be protecting, not something that we should throw away to either Islam or to socialism. And so when I think about what's currently happening, we can see someone like an Ilhan Umar or Zoran Mamdani. I'm messing up his name. Zoran Mamdani, who is the mayoral candidate in New York City, and he actually has a pretty good chance, I think, of winning. He is a Muslim, but he is also socialist. And these are just not things that are in line with who we are as Americans. There's a lot of danger there. And so I am going to talk with Laura. I'm going to bring her on in just a minute and get into this conversation. And so, yeah, without further ado, Krista, let's bring on Laura. Hey, Laura.
Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I literally sent you a DM a couple of days ago and was like, "Hey, you want to do a conversation with me?" You're like,
Right.
"Sure." So
And
I appreciate
then
it.
last night, oh, here's the topic. Okay,
Yeah,
let's do that.
this is what we're doing. Here we go. So thank you very much, girl, for just rolling. I'm
Absolutely.
hoping that the conversation is really just a starter conversation for people to go and do more research on their own, to go and see if what we're saying is true, or definitely to look in the Word of God and see if there is a compatibility or not, so that we can, as Christians anyway, stand firm and use our vote wisely and our voice wisely and things like that. So before we get too far in, tell us about yourself and why the topic of Islam for you.
Yeah, the topic of Islam is not something that I ever wanted to become all that knowledgeable on. It was not something that, I just had this, desire to learn about or anything like that. Really what it was more like I agreed to one assignment, I guess you would say, at a time over the course of years. And next thing I knew, I had 15 years of a very unique experience ministering to Muslims throughout the world, spending time in Afghanistan, Egypt, Jordan, with Muslims in countries throughout Africa, in all throughout America. I read the Quran, read huge portions of the Hadith. I visited mosques. I had conversations with imams, but all of this was just kind of in the context of sort of one thing at a time. And so that, without going into what all of those were, I here I am.
Well, I am definitely glad that you are here because we need the information. I want to just start out very basic. Help us understand what Islam is.
Yeah. Well, so Islam actually it was founded by Muhammad, who was he was born in around 570, and he was praying in a cave one day, and he had this experience with what he believed to be a demon, where this spiritual being shoved him up against the cave wall and told him to read, and he said, "I don't know how to read," and this spiritual being picked him up again, shoved him against the cave, and said, "Read, read." And he was like, "I don't know how to read," and eventually he was kind of let go, and he walked away with his muscles twitching. He was terrified out of his mind. This was when he was about 40 years old. So we're not talking about a child who was scared by a noise, right? This was a 40-year-old man who was absolutely convinced that he had just had an encounter with a demon. And he went home to his wife and told her, he hid under the covers. By the way, this is all recorded in the Islamic trusted sources. I'm not getting this from some Christian or whatever. I read this in the Islamic sources. So he went home, he hid himself under the covers and said that he believed he was demon possessed, and he decided to take his own life. So he would on several occasions, he started walking up a mountain to end his own life. And on the first occasion that he intended to end his life, he had an encounter again with this spiritual being. His wife's response to him when he told her that he thought he was demon possessed and he had this encounter with a demon, she said, "But you're such a good man. There's no way that you could be demon possessed. You must have been encountering an angel and you just thought it was a demon. And you're probably the next great prophet of Christianity." And her uncle was some sort of part of some sort of like heretical sect of Christianity. So she took Muhammad to her uncle, and the two of them basically convinced Muhammad he must be a prophet. And so when he was walking up the mountain to take his own life, not convinced, because obviously he was there, he knew that that was not an angel. This same spiritual being met him on his way up the mountain and said, "Yeah, I am an angel. I'm not a demon. I'm an angel. And you are the next great prophet. And your wife was right. You should listen to her." And so he wasn't convinced, of course. So like I said, he intended to end his life numerous times. But this angel, not angel, but claiming to be angel, said his name was Gabriel. And so Gabriel would meet Muhammad anytime he tried to take his life. And eventually Muhammad became quite comfortable with the idea of being a prophet who could claim that God himself had given a message through Gabriel to Muhammad, and found that he had a lot of power, a lot of control, and basically kind of Islam grew from there. He started out claiming to be the long-awaited final prophet of Christianity, but the Christians and the Jews in that area rejected him as their final prophet, awaited prophet. Of course, Christians were not awaiting a prophet, a final prophet. The Messiah had come and all of that, and Jews were not convinced he was the coming Messiah prophet. So, anyway, that's kind of how things got kicked off. Today, there, much like in Christianity, there are a lot of different denominations or sects, as you might say. There's Sunni Islam, which is the largest branch, has like 85%, 90% of Muslims worldwide. There's Shia Islam, which represents about 10 to 15% of Muslims. That's found mostly in Iran. There are Sufis who are more like mystical, but there are Sunnis and Shia who are Sufis. And then there are several like smaller kind of denominations, you might say.
Okay. And our intent is more of the big picture view, not this stream believes this and this stream believes that. That's where I'm
Right.
like, hey, go ahead and do some research on your own to find out more
Exactly.
about that.
Right.
But don't, so I have look, the family meeting is a little petty sometimes, but I hate them angels be making me think they demons.
Right? How annoying.
But then I really want to know, but did you learn to read?
Right.
I don't
Well,
know. Maybe it's just me. I have
there
questions.
you go. Seriously, right? Well, Muslims would tell you, no, he didn't learn to read, and that's why the Quran is the one miracle that proves that Islam is true, because it was given by someone, basically resulted from Muhammad's interactions with an angel speaking on behalf of Allah, and Muhammad couldn't read or write, and so therefore it's a miracle. You can't produce anything like the Quran. I would argue it would be quite difficult to produce something like the Quran, but for different reasons than
Mhm.
Muslims claim.
There are a lot of people who say, well, Islam and Christianity have a lot of things in common.
Mm.
Islam is a religion of peace. And if we go all the way back in history, then, we see Abraham as the father of both. Or like there's all of these things that I see or hear and have heard over the years that make Islam and Christianity very similar. Can
Mhm,
you tell us some of the are there any similarities? I'll say that. And
mhm.
then, what are some of the differences?
Yeah, well, the similarities are surface level. They believe in one God. They believe Jesus is the Messiah. They believe Adam was the first man and he disobeyed God. They believe in prophets and angels and demons and scriptures and heaven and hell. But they don't even mean the same things by most of those. They don't mean the same thing when they say one God, God is one. They don't mean the same thing when they say Jesus is the Messiah. They don't mean the same thing by Adam's disobedience, or by what the scriptures are, or what heaven and hell are like. And so when you really just have to go right below the surface and you start to see that they're completely different. So I'll give you a few examples. The nature of God is different, right? A lot of times people say, oh, well, Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Just because we believe a few different things about him doesn't mean that it's this different God altogether. And something I often tell people is, look, if someone told you that they are good friends with Laura Powell, and you said, "Oh, I'm good friends with Laura Powell too," and your friend starts saying, "Yeah, Laura Powell is, yeah, I know her from the University of Florida, and she played soccer there, and she was on the debate team, and she has blonde hair, and she's 6'2". And like pretty soon you're going to start to realize, oh, we're talking about, these two different people may go by the same name, right? Like
Mhm.
be referred to as God, or but we're clearly not talking about the same two people. I didn't go to the University of Florida. I didn't play soccer, or whatever example I gave. I'm not 6'2". I don't have blonde hair. So and we see something similar between Islam and Christianity. Two beings kind of claiming to be God, but the God of the Bible is relational. God of the Quran is not relational at all. The God of the Bible wants to be known. The God of the Quran cannot be known. The God of the Bible commands morality that is rooted in his character and his holiness. The God of the Quran uh, gives commands that are rooted purely in his power and his whimsical preferences based on his power, not in his character. There's a difference in the love of creation and love of all people versus the God of the Quran, repeatedly saying he has no love for the disobedient. He only loves those who perfectly obey him first, or obey him well first. The God of the Bible says, when you were still sinners, Christ died for you. I loved you first. Uh, we see in the Bible a God who has lowered himself, right, and suffered for his people, versus a being that's unwilling to suffer for anyone at all. Uh, a God who reveals himself as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, versus one who despises fatherhood. Um, we see a difference as well in the nature of humanity according to the two scriptures, the nature of Jesus, the problem with the world. According to Islam, the problem with the world is that people are forgetful. They just need reminders in the form of prophets and scriptures. Of course, according to Christianity, we are sinful in nature. We are fallen, and we need a savior. We don't just need a reminder. We need a savior who paid our penalty for us. The Great Commission is different. How to be saved is different. So, I mean, there's just very little in common beyond, like I said, the very surface.
I'm glad that you highlighted those things because it is fundamentally a different worldview.
Yes.
And but what we hear a lot is, well, it's okay, and there's so many similarities, and it's basically the same thing, and not the reality that no, it's really different. And their position on many things that we in, I'll say, the West, or we as Christians hold as good, true, or beautiful, like life, they don't
Yes.
always hold in the realm and space of good, true, and beautiful. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to highlight two things I've seen on X recently. They actually were sent to me from Krista that highlight some of my concerns. I have concerns about Zoran Mamdani, but I also have concerns about this new community development that this Islamic Center, the East Plano Islamic Center, is proposing to build. They've had a private, meeting with like the school district, and there is really some drive and push
Mm-hmm.
to create an entire Islamic community in Texas. And this would be almost like a gated community, but probably a little bit larger than, your average gated community.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a possibility or a thought that, hey, inside of this community, because it's only for the Islamic community, they could also implement Sharia law and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And so I want to go to that tweet first. Let me see if I can't read that. Okay. So this is from a woman named Amy Meck. And I don't know Miss Amy, but she posts a lot about what's happening in Texas. I'm assuming that she's somewhere in that Texas, maybe Plano area. And she
Mm-hmm.
says Plano mayor gives radical mosque private access to Texas school board officials to enforce Islamic values in your child's school. A newly surfaced video shows Mayor John Munns offering East Plano Islamic Center, also known as EPIC, special access to shape public school policy, exposing how this mosque has evolved into a powerful political force controlling education, demographics, public policy in Texas. No record of similar access for Christians or Hindu groups. EPIC pushes anti-Jewish, anti-Christian, anti-American Western indoctrination, held fundraisers for convicted terrorists. And then the mayor says, I'll bring school board members to you. At Epic School, hijab is mandatory for certain ages. Children wear Palestinian nationalist clothing and chant from the river to the sea, a genocidal slogan used by Hamas. The slogan from the river to the sea
Mm-hmm.
really refers to the annihilation of Jews. Is this what they'll push into Plano's public schools? Instead of condemning the mosque's radical teachings and terror ties, Mayor Munns handed them influence and awards, even proclaiming April 20th as Ramadan Day inside Epic itself. And so I am concerned about what it could mean to have Islamic teaching inside of American public schools because the values don't
Mm-hmm.
align. Do you want to say something?
Exactly. Yeah, they don't align at all, and it starts with Ramadan Day, right? But Ramadan is a month in Islam. It's not going to be long before that turns into a month, and a lot of these. This is just the first. A lot of this is all just the very first step,
Mhm.
and so. I mean, we can talk more about some of the specific problems with Islam, but this is what Islam is about, coming into communities in any way they can, and patiently fighting for power, talking to whoever they need to talk to, gaining a foot in the door, and then expanding, taking over, and eventually conquering the society. That is the goal of Islam,
Have we
according to the
not learned
teachings,
anything from what's happening in Europe? I'm glad you said the
right?
teachings say this is what should be done. This is what's being done in Europe, and we are
Right.
pretending,
Exactly.
participating as if this is not going to happen. I want to go and show one more tweet that I saw on X. This one is a video and it's a little over a minute long. So bear with us, but pay attention to what's being said. Pay attention to how this person who is Muslim is talking about Americans and talking about Christians.
Mm-hmm.
All this advancement in technology, yet they still haven't figured out that when you go to the bathroom, they're still wiping themselves with paper. All this advancement, think about how advanced they've become. They're trying to go to Mars. They're trying to take over Saturn. They're trying to do all this stuff. Their cars are trying to be self-driven. Yet when they go to do the most lowest form of human nature, the call of nature, they're still wiping themselves and cleaning themselves with paper. They're uncivilized. Do not be tricked and deceived by their technology. Do not be tricked and deceived by their philosophies and their westernizations and their ideas. At the end of the day, they are still backwards. Allah has sent us to these nations to civilize them. That's why Allah has sent us, to civilize these people. Yet the media makes us look like the barbaric ones. The reason they don't want you to be successful is because they're jealous of what you have. The Christians, jealous of what you have. Their nations, their religions are dying. So what they had to do, they had to change their religion. You don't believe me? We went to churches and they're now having the LGBT flags over there. A'udhu billah. Imagine your business, your religion is dying so much that the only thing that you could do is go and get some help from the LGBT. That's just the condition you've become in. Because their religion is dying. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us into the nations to guide these people from the darkness.
You know what? And this is not a nod to Islam by any means, but there is a plan.
Mm-hmm.
They have a strategy.
Yes.
They have a way of understanding what their holy book says and wanting to implement that. The way that they are serious about their faith, to me, should be a call to Christians. Like, we have to be serious about the God we serve. We have to be serious about our faith. And this is aside from being serious about our nation. We can talk about being serious about our nation, but man, I just,
well, if
I
we're not,
always,
we're going to lose it. So, I mean,
yeah,
if people think that there's something wrong with liking and appreciating and being grateful for your nation, well, then we'll lose it. So,
yeah.
I'll tell you this, another thought I had, something I think is really important to say, that he brought out is, I'm regularly asked in other contexts about Christians giving into the LGBTQ stuff and saying, well, what do you think about, like, just kind of maybe affirming people to win people, and then maybe we can disciple them down the road and that sort of thing. I think, obviously you know a whole lot of my initial response, what's wrong with that? We don't compromise in order to get people in the door and lie and all that sort of stuff. But I'll tell you, at the same time that maybe an atheist, lesbian, or, someone, who's identifies as transgender or something like that might feel affirmed, at the same time, for every one of those people, there is a Muslim who is saying, wow, I want nothing to do with Christianity at all. So if anyone thinks that somehow affirming or compromising or whatever is just is somehow an okay way of getting people in the door, we are turning off as many people as we are making feel welcome on false pretenses.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Let's talk about Zoran Mamdani. Oh, Krista's chiming in with the 1 and the 2. Go ahead.
I have a question. So I gotta unmute Monique here.
Who is this? Who let this person in the chat?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I really want you to restate, and let's make sure it doesn't go by people too quickly, the strategy here, because
Okay, right.
to me, this was one of the most important insights that you've given me over the years of our conversations on these issues. And that is that people are going to be working with Muslims in their everyday lives, in their workplace, on their kids' soccer teams, and they're going to encounter these people, and they present themselves as peace-loving and wanting to some degree, like, participate in our American way of life. They sign their kids up for soccer. They want to, they shop in our stores. They use our libraries and everything. But that's part of the strategy, because part of the strategy is they have more children than us.
Right.
And we're about to experience a population crash, which I don't think a lot of people know about if you're not on X. But the statistics of Japan and Europe and Canada and America, like, we are experiencing a population crash. And Muslims are not shy about commenting on this, that if enough of them can migrate into our countries, they have more children than us, they can overtake us in one generation.
Right.
And so while they can appear peaceful, and we have a sense of hospitality as Americans and freedom of religion, freedom of expression, that we want to give them a space and a voice in our country, because that's, I think, has traditionally been part of our way of life. The problem with that is that their worldview is so radically incompatible with our worldview and our way of life. And so I really would like you to tease that out a little bit more, of what their strategy is to, like, be a small population for a while, move in, slowly gain power, run for the school board, run for local office, get more power, have a lot of children, and in one generation take over.
Exactly. Yes. So Muhammad is repeatedly called the excellent pattern of conduct in the Quran. Muslims are told to imitate him, live how he lived, imitate him down to such details that commentators, Islamic scholars throughout history have said you have to stand up when you're putting this type of clothing on, because Muhammad did that. You have to tie your turban this way. You have to step with this foot first into the bathroom, because that's what Muhammad did. You have to step with the other foot into another type of room, because Muhammad did. So we're talking about, this is someone who people are supposed to follow in everything that he did. And he had a very clear 3-pronged strategy for taking over the Arabian Peninsula, and then telling his followers to go and do likewise with the rest of the world. So you might hear this referred to as the 3 stages of jihad. There's stage 1, when you are far outnumbered and you don't have too many resources in an area, then you need to preach tolerance, and you need to say that you have come to make peace. You are the religion of peace. You are on their side. You're different. You basically worship the same God, and basically say whatever you have to say to gain a foot in the door and to gain acceptance. Muhammad would also regularly play the victim in order to get compassion. And so there were people who helped him out because they felt sorry for him, because he was claiming to be such a victim. He would attack people, and then if they responded, he would claim victimhood. So we see a bit of that today too, right? So people kind of siding with Islam because they're the oppressed. Islam is the most oppressive religion in the history of the world. So anyway, stage 2 of jihad is once you have access to a few resources and enough people to actually pull this off, you start doing individual attacks. So what Muhammad did was he moved from Mecca to Medina, and he started attacking caravans that were passing through, and because he knew the routes, because he had been a caravan trader, and so you attack individual caravans and get those, either kill them or get them on your side, take their resources from them, take over tiny, just tiny little families and groups of people. And then when you have enough resources and people to actually pull this off, then you go full on conquer mode and you take over, which Muhammad, he took over several towns throughout the Arabian Peninsula, if we can trust the Islamic sources, which are in doubt. So if you're thinking, oh, but I've been watching, Jay Smith and Al-Fadi, and they're questioning, yes, there's a lot of reason to question whether the historical Islamic narrative is accurate. But I'm saying, according to the Islamic narrative, what Muslims know, anything they can possibly know about Muhammad, this is what happened. So he, when he got enough people on his side, enough resources, he took over the towns. He killed or drove out all the Jews from the area, all the Christians, and then he went back to Mecca, and he conquered Mecca. And by the end of his life, he had conquered pretty much the Arabian Peninsula. And then within like 100 years, his followers, who had been commanded to do likewise, had taken over, had spread throughout North Africa, the Middle East, and were soon going up into Europe and all of that. So this is the plan. It is inherently a political ideology as well as a religion. Just because they pray doesn't mean it can't be a political ideology. Christians and Americans may talk about separation of church and state all day long. There's no such thing in Islam. We cannot assume that there is such a thing just because that's what we have. And so to say, oh, well, they must be Islamists if they're, versus Muslims or something, if they're into this political takeover, the whole thing, the whole project of Islam is to take over the world, to subjugate everybody in the name of Allah.
Thank you for breaking that down. I appreciate you like laying out the strategy and what the end goal is and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Chris and I were talking when I was off camera, and just talking about the end goal as
Mm-hmm.
far as how they see it in regards to their eschatology, their thought and belief on the end times. Can you help us connect like the strategy that we see in moving into a place like the 3 steps of jihad and all of that? Like, how does that connect to their belief or thoughts about the end times?
Yeah, they they believe that they're the leaders, the people with money, with any sort of influence, with anybody who's been to any sort of Islamic seminary, madrasa, right? They know that the goal is to take over the world and usher in a worldwide caliphate, and then they actually expect Jesus to come back, oddly enough, and things kind of go from there. But that is, this is all looking toward kind of ushering in the kind of the end times and this great utopia where Islam rules and Muslims have all the power, and there are none of those Christians or Jews or other types of pagans that are talked about in the Quran. By the way, the Quran says that Christians, Jews, and polytheists are the lowest of creatures, of all creatures. And if you have ever talked to a Muslim about pigs or bacon or anything like that, and you see their reaction, and then you think about the Quran teaching that we are actually lower than pigs, we're the worst of creatures, it helps to kind of explain, I think, some of their justification or rationalization in their mind for lying and deceiving and killing and taking over. Muslims would tell you that murder is wrong, just like Christians would. But as I said in the beginning, when we have things in common, when we start to define our terms, we realize that we have almost nothing in common at all. And so, yeah, it's, you don't, murder a human unless, of course, you can justify them not being human or fully as human as you are, which would include women, Christians, Jews, and non-Muslims. So it's yeah, there's definitely a strategy here.
And maybe just to follow up with that, like, my best understanding is that the goal of Islam is, for lack of a better term, world domination.
Yes.
It's like, people are very afraid of Christian nationalism. I think that Islamic nationalism or Sharia law is a much bigger concern.
Without a
And
doubt.
that is the end goal. The end goal for Islam is politicization,
Yes.
forced conversion.
Mhm.
And I
Right.
don't think that people realize that. And this is why I keep saying this worldview is utterly incompatible with Christianity, because we do not
Yes.
believe in forced conversion. We believe in appeals to reason
Mhm.
and
Right.
free will choices, and the Great Commission is not compulsion.
Right.
And our way of life is fundamentally not compatible. So people will come in our comments and say, well, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, it's un-American. And I'm like, except when the freedom of religion leads to the extermination of our country, our culture, and our way of life, there
Right.
has to be parameters on that.
Exactly. And yeah, I was at a conference last week in Michigan. It was phenomenal. One of the days I happened to sit next to or at the same table with an ex-Muslim. And when I was asking him, I actually recorded yesterday. So if people want to hear the whole story, I think it's pretty cool. On the Knight and Rose show, I recorded the whole, the highlights of the conversation. But I'll just say here that this gentleman had escaped from Pakistan and he had rejected Islam. And he told me that he did not follow any religion at all because he had been taught as a Muslim that there is, of course, no room for any of the things you just said, which is why I thought of it. There is no freedom of religion. You're claimed at 8 days old for Islam. And the penalty for leaving Islam is death. So there's no freedom of religion. There is no room for doubting. The Quran says if you start to have a doubt, you better get rid of that doubt and just trust the Quran and don't ask any questions, because you are basically an infidel if you have any doubts at all. So there's no freedom of conscience. There's no freedom of reasoning. There is no freedom of debate, deliberation, differences, So interestingly, this Pakistani man wanted to abolish all religion throughout the world to the best of his capability. That's his life goal, and usher in the U.S. Constitution for the whole world. So we had some interesting conversation, as you might imagine. He wants to take a document that was created as kind of an outworking, basically, of the Judeo-Christian ethic and Christian worldview. Of course, I know that there were, some deists who were integrally involved in that. They also, though, had been heavily influenced by the Christian worldview, and yet he had, we had a great conversation. But he left Islam because he knew that there is absolutely no room for any of those things that you just listed, or the things that are in our Bill of Rights, in the Declaration of Independence, this sort of thing. So, yeah, there's no room for that.
Gosh, I am trying to figure out, like, in the time we have left, which isn't a lot of time, where to swim to. I want to swim to Zoran Mamdani.
Okay.
And really make sense for the people who just can't make their brain cells connect around it.
Mhm.
Because there are people who will say, well, he's for helping people live. He's going to give us free things, because people don't
Yeah,
understand
they don't
socialism.
understand. Right.
But the
Exactly.
main thing and there's a claim that he doesn't talk about his religion, although there are YouTube videos of him there talking specifically to Muslims. You can just go on the interwebs, people, and you can
Mhm.
see these things. He is not separating himself from his ethnic heritage nor his religion. Just because in English he doesn't mention, hey, I'm Muslim, doesn't mean that he is disconnected from his religion. And just because he gives you free things does not actually mean that that is for the best of human flourishing or the best of the American people or our nation as a whole.
Right.
And so I want to know, when we think about someone like Zoran Mamdani, what kind of Islam does he represent in our politics today? Because I also heard you say that Islam as a religion and a political movement, it's the same. Like, there is no true distinction.
Mhm.
And should we be concerned about him as a Muslim bringing that ideology into our public sphere?
We should be concerned about absolutely everything he stands for, both that he has demonstrated and that he has said with his words. I mean, this is someone who supports rent control. If you don't know what's wrong with that, please read a book on basic economics. In fact, there's one called Basic Economics that's phenomenal by Thomas Sowell that I recommend.
I just want to send people books. I'm
Seriously,
like,
right?
you can read this. Actually, you know what? If you love socialism that much, go live in Cuba.
Yeah.
Like,
You know what?
go live in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Go live and you have not traveled. People who argue for socialism have never lived outside of America, even in non-socialist countries. Like,
Right.
just step outside of America for longer than a 2-week vacation where you live on a resort.
Exactly. Right. That's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing. So and you may know, I've spent time in about 35 countries now at this point, and almost every one of them I was hosted by local people. I'm not, these are not like, cruises or, staying in Western hotels or anything like that, but mostly ministry in which I was hosted and lived in the homes of people where I was ministering, people who had invited me, asked me to come because I had something specific they wanted their community to benefit from. And those experiences solidified my economic perspective and a whole worldview, really, like very little else. So yeah, rent control, huge problem. If you want to see rent options become unavailable, you want fewer possibilities, fewer places to rent, and much higher prices, because when there are fewer places, there are higher prices, supply and demand. This is what's going to happen. There's going to be fewer available rentals, and it's going to be even more unaffordable. New York is already unaffordable for so many people because of government interference. This is not the result of the free market. So anyway, he has advocated for abolishing prisons.
Yes.
You want to live next to people who can't control themselves in population. He's talked about replacing the police with social workers. I have a lot of friends who are social workers. They are not equipped to
Didn't
be
Chicago
police.
already try that?
Yes, this has been tried.
And
Yes.
there
He
has been
has.
social workers killed
Yes. Oh,
because
yeah.
of that idea.
Yes, exactly. He wants
So,
to ban guns, which, shocker, he doesn't want people to be able to defend themselves. If you have an issue with guns, again, do the research. Where law abiders are able to have firearms, those are the safest places with the lowest criminality. So where it's illegal to have a firearm, the people who have no problem breaking the law are the only ones with firearms. So, you can choose. He wants city-owned grocery stores. Okay. So if you don't know what's wrong with that, please read a book. on economics, free public transit, free childcare. He wants to raise the minimum wage. So if you want to put businesses out of business and you want to make sure that people with no experience never get any sort of opportunities to gain experience, to gain skills so that they can rise in their income and what they contribute and stuff, then yeah, sure, minimum wage, why not? But that is not a help for people. That puts businesses to death, and it also makes everything more expensive because the businesses that stay in business have to pass on the cost to somebody, right? They're going to pass it on to the consumer. So I mean, we could go on and on, but you're asking about Islam, and he is a Muslim. We know he's a Muslim. He hasn't talked a whole lot about what type of Muslim he is, but here's this guy, he probably knows what he is commanded to do, and if he doesn't, then he is a pawn in the hand of those who do. And so, you were asking me earlier about moderate Muslims and that sort of thing. The thing is, I've ministered to a lot of moderate Muslims, and basically they're able to be moderate because they don't know what the Quran says, they don't know what the Hadith say, they don't know how Muhammad lived, they just don't know. And yet, because they're Muslims, they will vote for a Muslim over anybody else any day of the year. So even moderate Muslims are unknowingly advancing this country toward what they, in most cases, escaped from. And so even that is very dangerous because Islam, as we've touched on, has no tolerance in its end goal for any of the things that have been taken for granted, I would say, by Americans for the past 200 plus years. So
Yeah, no tolerance at all. And yet they seem more informed about what those things are than we are. Someone in the comments said, and I don't know if it was like we've been tricked into believing socialism or but it was something along that line. And I said, I think we've actually been taught. Oh, it was about, we've been tricked into hating our country. And I actually felt like we've been taught to hate our country. We've been taught, that socialism is the best way to go. We've been taught that all religions are equal and all of that. And that's not true.
Right.
And now here we are with millennials and Gen Z as the generations that are most likely to vote for socialism. When it's because we don't understand that socialism has been tried and has failed several times over. We don't understand, nor have we been taught the beauty of the values that we hold. And because we experience so much freedom all the time, we take that freedom for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is part of our issue. And then we get a place like EPIC, the East Plano Islamic Center, who wants to start in our schools and to create a specific community development just for, their community of Muslims and the implementation of Sharia law. And people don't understand that there is really a difference between Sharia law and American civil law.
Yes, without a doubt. Absolutely.
So,
in many ways. And in fact, I'll give you maybe a few examples, unless if you didn't want me to change the subject at all.
Please.
Go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Give some examples. Help explain like what are some of those differences? So
one thing, a few things, I'll give a few examples, mostly related to women. I'm sure you have male listeners as well, but hopefully, maybe they have sisters or wives or friends or mothers who they care about and love. But women under Islam, women are second-class citizens who exist to meet a man's need for sex and food. That's the only reason women exist, for sex and food. A man can have up to 4 wives. the woman or women have absolutely no say whatsoever in the marriage, in anything else. Muhammad actually had at least 11 wives at one time, and he the hadith, which are, by the way, in order to obey the Quran, you have to read and study and follow the hadith, because the Quran commands Muslims to imitate Muhammad and do whatever he said to do, and don't do whatever he said not to do. And so you have to go to the hadith to find out how Muhammad lived, because the Quran does not record his life or his, how he lived. So they are a critical part of following Islam. So this excellent pattern of conduct would go around and have sex with all 11 of his wives in one day. He would walk around with semen all over his clothing, even though the girl he married at 6 years old and consummated the marriage with at 9 years old, it was her responsibility to always be cleaning it off of him. He would boast about this, and the men would ask him, how does he have the energy to do it? And others would say, Allah has given him the strength of 30 men. And so this is how a man is supposed to live. When Muhammad was, I just alluded to it, but when Muhammad was 53 years old, he married a 6-year-old. He consummated the marriage at 9. And so throughout the Muslim majority world that I've spent a lot of time in at this point, 9-year-old girls are regularly handed over to men in their 50s so that they can be raped and basically enslaved for the rest of their childhood. It is absolutely disgusting and despicable. It angers me like nothing else. It's just so horrifying to think of these and to see the faces of these 9-year-olds who are being raped by 55-year-old men. Absolutely disgusting. And the parents who sell their daughters to these men, absolutely disgusting. Makes me so angry. This obviously violates U.S. child protection laws, right? The polygamy violates. I think it still violates. Things happen so fast these days. I think it still violates our marital laws. I think you can only be married to one person. I don't know. You can correct me. Women are supposed to be beaten if their husband fears disobedience from her. So catch that. A woman doesn't even have to disobey her husband to be beaten justifiably. The husband just has to fear disobedience from her. So all you need is an insecure man and to justify beating women. And women are to be captured in war and raped. Sorry, I hope I just didn't get you banned from YouTube.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and break it all the way down.
My partner would be like, editor.
No, break it all the way down, because this is what I want to highlight, though, is that it's so incompatible with Christianity. It's incompatible with our views on the West and our founding documents. And what does it mean to protect life? What does it mean to flourish? What does it mean for the pursuit of liberty? Like, what does it mean? These things are not compatible with our values. And I don't care if someone is promising you free things,
stuff,
groceries, or rent control. We have to put things in order. Now, look, I can talk about crony capitalism. I can talk about, issues that we can see in our policies on both the Democratic and the Republican side. I am up for that. What I'm not up for is bringing in a worldview that does not fit our American worldview, nor does it fit Christianity. And aside from not fitting Christianity, it actively seeks to kill Christianity.
Yes, exactly. It seeks to wipe out Christianity. There is no inherent dignity, value, or worth of human beings. And so that is, Muslims are taking that from the Christian worldview, or pretending, if they're claiming any sort of inherent dignity, that comes from Genesis and humans being made in the image of God. That is not a teaching from Islam. There are 2 places in the Hadith that make a comment. Everything that is in the Quran was actually, and pretty much everything that Muhammad taught was either for his own benefit or was stolen from other religions and sects that he came into contact with. But so there are two places that say that man was created in the image of God, but the context makes it abundantly clear that it means nothing like what the Bible means by it. And so it says, like, basically it says, so just like Allah was 90 feet tall, Adam was also 90 feet tall, and people have been shrinking ever since, things like that. So it's nothing to do with dignity and worth. So yeah, this is whether you want to talk about how it's incompatible with Christianity or how it's incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. There are many reasons it's incompatible with both. So again, like you said at the beginning, not that we're equating them, but it is in fact incompatible with both.
So going back for a minute to Monique's question of what kind of Muslim is Mamdani, he said he's a moderate, but why does he promote transing kids and marching in the gay pride thing and waving the flag? Like, I've never known a Muslim that does that. And is it an act? Like, what is he doing? Is there such a thing in Islam as a progressive Muslim? Like, I'm super confused about that part of his platform.
Right. Well, what there is in Islam is the doctrine of taqiyya, which is the doctrine of deception, essentially. And so Muslims are to imitate Muhammad by saying absolutely whatever they have to say and taking whatever positions they have to take for a time in order to get into power. So I would bet that once he gets to where he wants to be, the next people, probably after the Christians, he'd probably, the Jews would be among the first to go. Let's say that Mamdani and numerous other Muslims got into power, they got the majority, took over the US or whatever. Jews are going to be the first to go. There is such an absolutely horrific low view of Jews in Islam. There are stories in the Muslim sources about Allah turning Jews into monkeys and pigs. And I have friends from Muslim majority countries who were taken to the zoo when they were school children, and they were shown the monkeys and they were shown pigs, and they were told these people were Jews, but because Jews are so disgusting and despicable, this is what Allah did to them. So, and this is part of the whole, like, preparing children to be willing to end the lives of Jews. But so they would be first. The Christians would probably be next, or maybe then probably atheists. But because there is this useful alliance right now that the LGBT community wants to eliminate conservative Christianity for the most part.
Come on and speak into it. Speak into it.
And Muslims have that same objective. They are working together. They are using each other. And behind the scenes, people have bets on, ultimately who's gonna take out who first. Are the the LGBTQ community going to take out the Muslims, or vice versa? Most people are behind the scenes, who I know, are betting that the Muslims will ultimately win.
That should be public knowledge.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, that's why
LGBTQ don't have no guns. They're not about that life.
That's right. Exactly.
They're not about
exactly.
that.
That's right. Exactly. Yep.
But I mean, you bring up such a good point. Again, it's this idea that Herbert Marcuse and others came up with of, how do we grow the proletariat? How do we bring together these religious minorities? And we don't see this just with Herbert Marcuse, but we do see this with many people who, for example, looking at Blacks and the LGBTQ plus community, and how do we link them together so that we can really grow our movement as LGBTQ plus? I think it's this intentional growth of the oppressed class to be able to, like you said, overthrow conservatism, overthrow capitalism, overthrow Christianity, all of these minority groups. But at the end of the day, they're going to eat each other. There's only going to be one group left. Who is
Exactly.
that group going to be?
Right. Exactly.
Muslims ain't here to just sit up here and kumbaya, let me raise a little flag with you. Let's go on a pride march. That's not the goal. The goal is total annihilation. And I feel like everybody just wants to sit around and like, oh, we're just so friendly. Oh, they're just so good. We are just going to kumbaya this moment up as the oppressed people. That is not the reality. People are living. I don't even know what world they're living in if they think that that's really the reality of what Muslims are doing. It is definitely a long game for some, but then for some, it's like, no, we want total annihilation now.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. We are definitely at time. Girl, we have gone over, but I want to hit some questions in the comments. Laura Hartley had a question and I just lost it. Girl, I can't see that. I don't have my glasses on. She's talking. Kristen said it's on the screen. I got, hold on, let me enlarge this. I've been struggling with whether or not to support the businesses that are obviously Islamic owned. I'm not a boycott bandwagon shopper, but I don't feel comfortable supporting it.
To add context to that, she lives near the Epic Center near East Plano. And so she knows that these businesses are connected to the Epic project. And so she's feeling like, I don't really want to shop there. And, any thoughts about boycotts or, I mean, I think it's something Christians can disagree about, but I mean, just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, how good is their coffee and what are the alternatives? I'm just kidding. I mean, I over the last few years, I've come to love coffee too. You didn't, and in fact, I don't think that comment even mentioned the coffee. I think it was another one. I'm seeing some of the questions in the comments as they're coming up. Someone mentioned coffee, but I do agree with Krista that Christians can disagree on this, but that I would not be shopping there.
Okay, so let's bring it all the way home because Christians will be the first ones to be like, should I shop there? Should I not? I know, Auntie Laura, this isn't about you, but we will have this back and forth about should I shop there? Should I not? But go ahead and let Raphael Warnock or Jamal Bryant down in Atlanta talk about we not shopping at Target. We need to boycott Target. They come openly with their socialist agenda to boycott anything they think is anti-Black or anti-social justice warrior movement or anti-socialist, but we as evangelicals will be like, I don't know. Or would you boycott this? Or I don't know where the question's coming from because on one hand, they will boycott the mess out of something if it meets their need and their benefit. But they will openly support Islam coming into your community as if they don't want to kill you too, just because you a minority.
Right.
Islam doesn't discriminate.
Right. Exactly.
You ain't Islamic.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I can't make it make sense, but the conversation of boycotting comes up and it's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, girl. I can't make it make sense. I can't make it make sense. You can't because what's his name? Jamal Bryant, that Black pastor down in Atlanta, has been on the news. He's been on Fox. He's been on this. He's been on that. Y'all need to boycott until they recognize that Black Lives Matter. Y'all need to boycott until this, that, and the third. But when Islam come in talking openly about we hate you, you are not human. You are a lower class of civilization. We can annihilate you. You are just jealous. But then we got to take 3 turns to the left and spin around some kind of icon in order for us to understand that we don't need to shop there.
Right. Exactly.
And now,
we vote with our dollars. That's one of the cool things about a free market economy is that we vote in the sense we vote with our dollars. When we support something, we're showing that we want it to continue. We appreciate it being there. When we choose to go somewhere else, if there's not enough demand for that, then they'll figure out something else. But to feel obligated to give our money to people who actively want to kill us, I mean, it's I mean, it is essentially, although it's a little more subtle, than this scenario. If someone came up to you on the street and said, "Hey, I'm looking to I've got some short-term goals, but my long-term goal is to buy as many weapons as I can and take out a bunch of Christians, and I'm just raising money for that. So could you contribute?" Like I mean, wouldn't you say no? Probably. So
No, I don't know. It makes me question nowadays.
right. Yeah. So I'm going with no. No matter how. Yeah. No. I'm shopping somewhere else. So.
And you know what? I know that I do agree. Like, this is not something to bind people's consciences to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But if you giving money to the people who hate you, who
Mhm.
think you are not fully human, who think
Mhm.
that you have no value or worth,
Mhm.
if that's where you think you should spend your money, I have other questions.
Mhm.
Because what are you funding?
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
want to build a whole community.
Mhm. Right.
They
Yeah.
want to take over your country.
Right.
But it's only $4.99 for the cup of coffee, or it's only, or they're the only shop in my neighborhood. Then you need to either take a bus, get a taxi. I don't know. Drive.
I'm with
But
you
you
on that.
we can't justify it. And that's the thing, is that we continually want to justify why we do it.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
want to justify, like, Lori in the chat, but he don't talk about his religion. So because he don't talk about his religion and he wants to give free things, you can't make it make sense. If
Right.
you want free things, just say you want free things.
Right. Right.
But
Exactly.
at the same time, be truthful. So don't
Right.
talk out one side of your mouth and then out the other side. You gotta have to speak straight. I want free things, and I will accept socialism and Islam to get my
Mhm.
free things. That's the
Right.
truth.
Right.
But
Exactly. Yep.
girl,
That's
I just
exactly it.
can't. I can't.
Yep.
Today, when I saw that, and you know what? I didn't even put it in for Krista to show. But Zoran Mamdani quoting, what was it? Psalm 35. I think it's Psalm 35. Weeping may endure for a night. The Muslim, you talk about a trick of the enemy, and he
Mhm.
wants to be able to compel us to vote for socialism by using our own words of scripture against us.
Right.
This is
Exactly.
where we
Yeah.
at, people.
Exactly.
We
I
ain't in
mean,
the nice realm. No, this ain't the kiddie pool. If you ain't swimming in the deep, you need to get out the water.
that's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. I think part of it is, I love what you said about if you just want your free stuff and you're willing to abandon all of your freedom and Christianity convictions, the future of our nation and all of that, your kids' freedoms, your grandkids' freedoms, say it like it is. Just say what it is. We still need to be I think too often we allow other people to to decide which words we can use and which words we can't, and how words are going to be defined. And so we buy into using this language that masks what things really are. And so I am all about what you just said when it comes to, just say what it is. You are willing to hand over your freedom of conscience, your freedom of religion, your freedom of thought and reasoning, and and your everything that we that this country has been about, and all that Christianity is about as well. Again, not the same thing, but both things are incompatible with Islam and socialism. Say what it is, admit it, let's ask the type of questions that get people to acknowledge what they are really talking about.
Girl, yes. But oh yeah. Oh, I have so many other thoughts, but we are at
Oh
time. I am
man,
so
we'll
sorry.
have to do it again because I
We'll
know
have
we
to
have a
do it again.
whole other show
There,
worth of things to talk about. I know.
we do.
So
We really do. You know what? The only thing that I want to ask you is, how can people stay connected with you? Tell us about your podcast. Yeah, so that people know. And because I know Wintering Night who is your podcast partner, was in the chat. I don't know if he's still here. Okay. But yeah, tell us about your podcast and how we can stay in contact.
great. Yeah, the Knight and Rose show, KNIGHT and Rose show, is on YouTube. There's no video, it's just audio. But it is on YouTube. It's also basically anywhere you can get podcasts. So I'd love for you to check that out. We talk about a whole wide variety of topics from a Christian worldview, including policy, public policy. Wintering Night has a strong background in public policy, as do I. We talk about economics, relationships, science, all the things from a Christian worldview. I also have a website, laurazpowell.org. You could also find it by looking for An Affair with Reason. I also, yeah, the URL is laurazpowell.org. And I speak at conferences. I'm doing a lot of work on my dissertation right now, and so I'm not at quite as many conferences as I've been the last few years. But basically between the podcast, and Facebook. Laura Zeifer Powell. And most of I mean, you can send me a friend request, or you can just hit follow or whatever. But almost all, I would say probably all of my posts are public, so anybody can see them. So that's a good place to kind of have some interaction as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for the conversation. I am sorry that we didn't get to even half of the original question. Remember that long list?
Right.
But thank you so much. This has been helpful. You guys, look, we are just scratching the surface. Get out there, read a book, do some research for yourself, and know that, while we want to equip people, we can equip you so far, but you also have to go out, read the book, do the research. Wintering Night put a book in the chat. Wintering Night, can you please put the name of that book by Douglas Murray back in? Just write it again so I can see the name of it, please. Yeah, so go out, follow Laura, and yeah, so thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Also, if you are not, ladies and gentlemen, familiar with the Center for Biblical Unity, check out the Center for Biblical Unity at our website, Center for Biblical Unity, all spelled out.com. You can find our blogs, where we'll be speaking, and travel calendar, books we recommend, from first sources, so books that we might not agree with, but still are helpful reads, and then books we definitely do agree with. You'll see what others have said about our ministry. Please like our YouTube page, or subscribe actually to our YouTube page, like our Facebook page. You can also follow me on Facebook at Center for Biblical Unity. You can follow me at on Facebook at Monique Duson or Chantal Monique Duson. Either one will come up. Hit us on X. Follow us on X. We are doing more there as well. And then pray for me that I am just not as petty as I really want to be. You guys, we are so thankful for all of you. We are grateful that you are here and that you follow us, that you interact in the comments with us. We are grateful that you are our family. And yeah. Wintering Night put in the comments, The Strange Death of Europe. I believe it is by Douglas Murray. So check that book out. And yeah, you guys have a great week. Have a very happy 4th of July. Celebrate America on the 4th of July and the great nation and freedom that we have been blessed with by God's providence. And yeah, enjoy. We will see you next week on the Family Meeting.